1. I've worked at this ice cream shop for about 2.5 years now. It's a convenient drive in a cute part of town, and I love everybody I work with. We're all high schoolers, most of us seniors, and we've all been there for quite a while now. It's important of me to mention the location in which this shop is located, as I believe that information is quite relevant. The shop is located in Old Dublin, Ohio. Emphasis on the old part, although the town has definitely done a great job revamping the area and making the buildings and streets look much more modern. Old Dublin has got to have some history. Let me mention that I don't know much about what used to be in Dublin centuries ago, but my manager has mentioned a few times that Old Dublin goes way back. I'll be sure to figure out what this means. Anyways, back to the main story. Throughout my 2.5 years of working at said ice cream shop, there have been many times where I am alone in the store, whether this be because I'm working with the only other person this shift and they are on break, I'm closing by myself regardless of how much I despise doing this, etc. During the daytime, Old Dublin is full of life, as many restaurants, coffee shops, and stores line the streets. But at night, when everything is darker and quieter, and most people are home for the night, everything seems a bit different. Let me begin with my first encounter with whatever the hell is going on at work. It was probably around 8 p.m. in March of 2017. I was hired no more than a month ago at this point. I was working with a boy named Cameron who had been working there for a few years, so he was training me. I remember this night the weather was terrible. Freezing rain and strong wind. As I didn't have my license yet, my mother had to pick me up once we closed at 10 p.m., and she wasn't too happy about that. Due to the weather, sales were low that night, although we did have a group of PTO moms come in, asking us to pack 12 pints of ice cream for them for a party tomorrow. As annoying as this was, they promised a favorable tip, so I willingly packed more than half the pints, leaving the rest for Cameron. Me being new at this job made a mess. Ice cream dribbling off the counter onto the floor, melting all over the countertops, etc. After the moms left, Cameron told me he was going on break, and that I would be alone at the store for half an hour if that was okay, as long as I cleaned up the mess I made. I didn't want to seem like a pussy, so I told him yeah, I'd be fine. He left, and I went into the back to fill up the mop bucket. When I walked back out to the main area of the shop behind the display case of ice cream, where I had made a mess, it looked like it had been cleaned up already. I remember standing there confused, wondering if Cameron had come back to clean it up when I was filling up the mop bucket, but realized I would have heard him come back in, as the doors are really heavy and loud. I brought the mop bucket to the back, not needing it anymore, when Cameron returned from break. I told him what happened, and what shocked me the most part was that he wasn't. He said that stuff like that happens all the time here, and that the ice cream shop is built on top of old ground. It probably doesn't help that there's a massive cemetery literally right next to the store. I told my mom what had happened that night as well, and she was no more amused by this, calling me crazy. Many months passed, and I don't remember anything significant happening over the summer. The only things I can recall that felt a bit unsettling were the 2 doors to get in and out of the store locking by themselves, and the music playing in the store randomly getting louder and then shutting off completely. Last week, though, shit kinda went down. It was a Wednesday night and very cold out. Due to the lack of customers, my manager asked me if I could close by myself because 2 people weren't needed. I barely agreed, knowing that I'd be paranoid the entire time. I brought my homework with me to distract myself, and got ready for a very lonely 5-hour shift. The sky got dark quickly, as it is December, and I maybe dealt with a total of 4 customers the entire night. In the winter we close at 10, and because the shop is so small, I didn't start dishes and chores until 9:30, knowing I'd have plenty of time. While turning on the sinks, I heard the front door open and close, initially rolling my eyes because I didn't want to actually do my job. I walked out into the main area, only to find nobody there. I knew I couldn't have imagined the sound, but chalked it up to somebody walking in, seeing nobody in the shop because I was in the back, and walking out. I got back to doing dishes, but propped the kitchen door open so I could easily see into the main area. After dishes, I began restocking our pints, but noticed that the patio lights were off. I went to the back to turn them on, thinking that was weird, and walked back out to finish stocking pints. I sweep and mop the floor as my last task for the night, and when I go to the back to put the broom away, the sink water is running, not trickling, but a full-on stream was coming out the faucet. I turned it off and immediately got chills. I clocked out, shut and locked the doors, took the trash out and called my friend as I walked to my car, feeling extremely creeped out. Because the winter has only just begun, I know there will be plenty more shifts where I have to close by myself, and I am not looking forward to it. I'm curious as to if old Dublin used to be a war zone, part of a cemetery, etc. Regardless, I've got a lot of research to do. 2. Background. I had a friend, M, of my friend's T's house for the first time, about a mile from an old sanitarium. It's just us three. Not sure if there's any history in the building, but it seems 30 to 40 years old. We go inside and eventually end up in the kitchen. There's a side door with a set of stairs leading to the basement in front of it. I'm standing at the kitchen table and listening to their conversation, occasionally adding input. Out of the corner of my eye, I notice a girl standing in the doorway by the stairs and back door. It seemed as though she was lonely and wished to join us. All my attention is to communicating with her, and she seems to be warming up. I let a small chuckle slip out, and T asks me what's up. I tell them it's nothing and not to worry about it. When she hears this, she becomes incredibly upset and hurt, almost violently so. They continue their conversation while I reassure her I wasn't trying to belittle her or hide her presence from them, and I offer my asking them if they are comfortable with her joining us in the kitchen as repayment, and she gleefully accepted. So I turn back to T and say, actually, it wasn't nothing. He looks at me puzzled. I turn to M and start asking him questions like how long he's lived here, if he knows how old the house is, or anything about the previous tenants. T interjects with the fuck are you getting at? To which I reply, we're not alone here. This house has already been lived in for quite some time. After some talking, I convince M that I believe she is benevolent, and that he has nothing to worry about. They agree, and when she moves to the chair next to me, her true presence is revealed. Huge, dark, intimidating. But kind, lonely, and mostly scared of being misunderstood, and happy to be accepted. After some time, I can tell that M is a bit uneasy, so I request that she return downstairs and that I will join her in a moment. A bit upset, a bit excited, she accepts. I look to M and apologize in case I made him uncomfortable, and continue to assure him that he needn't worry. So what's downstairs, I ask. Nothing except the laundry, really. You can go down there if you want. And so I do. I walk over and turn the basement light on, realizing that I would now be entering her domain. I nervously stare down the steps, then I charge downstairs joyously. When I get to the bottom, I take a few more steps in and look around, taking in the massive amounts of energy that have collected. Although the basement is mostly empty, I do notice some furnishings in the room straight ahead of me. I walk towards it and stop halfway through the doorway, turn and lean against it. She beckons me to enter into her room, and I inform her that I need to remain cautious in all situations, which she seems to understand. I sensed an immense feeling of loneliness, and she informed me that everyone else that had been able to see her had been afraid of her, and no one really cared for her before she died either. I spend maybe 10 or 15 minutes there with her, and feel nothing but joy and love and light. Honestly, I felt more acceptance and more content around her than with most, if not any, living human. Eventually, the idea of moving into the room comes into my head, and she is in love with the idea. As time goes on and we connect more, I begin to wish that she never had to be lonely again. I begin to consider, not seriously, taking my life to try and join her there eternally. She informs me that she would never request that from me, but also would not oppose. The thought becomes more and more enticing, so I apologize and take my leave. I rejoin the others, and as best I can, mention the room seems lived in, and he mentions his roommate. After conversing for a bit, I ask how much he pays in rent, and he replies, well, the room downstairs is available in a couple months for $500. I let him know I'm not really in the position currently, but that I would definitely consider it. How can I help her? What can I do? How much should I trust her intentions? I've had a handful of interactions and experiences, but none quite this powerful before. The place and the girl truly felt like home to me. 3. I'm not sure if this is paranormal or not, but it still scared me. So me and my brother were down in the basement of our grandma's house. In my grandma's basement, on one side is the laundry room, and the other side is a gaming room that she set up for us when we were little. My brother and I were watching YouTube. I think we were either watching Sam and Kobe or Chills. Either way, we were watching a spooky video. Out of nowhere, the back door to the left of my TV made a noise. Something or someone knocked on the back door. Without thinking, I yelled for whoever was on the other end to come in. I thought maybe my dad or stepmom was outside and trying to come in. Once I realized that it couldn't be them because my dad was at work and my stepmom was upstairs in bed. And it was around midnight and nobody would be outside. I jumped up so fast off the chair I was sitting in to lean up against the door because I didn't know if it could be an intruder or not. I locked the door and told my younger brother to run upstairs. Once I knew that he was upstairs and safe, I let go of the door handle and bolted upstairs myself. I told my grandparents and stepmom what just happened. Of course, them being adults, they didn't automatically think ghost. They thought intruder. My grandfather takes a flashlight and a baseball bat outside to see who it could be. He didn't find anyone like I knew he would. For the next couple of weeks, weird things started to happen. If you were in the kitchen late at night, you could hear what sounded like soft jazz music coming from a radio. We don't own a radio. The phone in my grandma's office would ring, and when you went to answer it, there would be beeping coming from the other end, or complete silence. My whole family is skeptical of the paranormal except me. I decided to look up the history of my house. I found out that the previous owner died in the house. There was a lady, her husband, and her brother that lived in that house. The brother died of heart complications down in the basement. When they lived there, the basement was like another bedroom or something. The chair that I was sitting in at the time of the incident was his favorite chair, and he could have died in it. I'm not really sure, because it didn't tell me. I found out that the husband died in the office room upstairs. It used to be his man cave. The husband got really sick and had to be put on bed rest. They turned his man cave into a little hospital room. The wife reportedly said that before he died, he kept trying to call someone. Every time someone would ask him who he was trying to call, he would always answer with, "I don't have a clue." He would look at the phone with a confused expression like he didn't know how the phone got into his hand in the first place. The husband was also really into jazz before he got sick. He would play it throughout the house and dance around with his wife. So that could explain the random jazz music I keep hearing. It's been about a week since anything has happened. I still don't know if that incident was paranormal or just pesky teenagers. What do you guys think? 4. Alright, I'm gonna be straight up with everyone. This paranormal encounter isn't very scary, not even for me. Which is strange because I'm an easy person to scare, especially when it comes to topics like this. 2 friends of mine were crashing in an old, most likely 18th century, foundation of a house that was just off of a hiking trail very close to the entrance of a state park. This park is relatively close by to where I lived at the time. I know that sounds weird for 2 guys to be staying in an old, abandoned foundation, but I'm sure everyone is aware of the drug epidemic. They just didn't have anywhere else to go at the time. I knew they didn't have any food or drinks, so I put some canned food and some sodas in a book bag and headed down to where they were staying at around 7 a.m. I didn't have a car then, so I was walking, but I grew up in this area and knew the lay of the land. It was summertime, and the weather was shaping up to be a nice day. There are train tracks straddling a river that lead to the back end of the state park, and I knew that would be the fastest way by foot. I headed down to the river and followed the train tracks northbound. After about a half hour of walking, I came to the back end of the park. I knew of an opening in the fence, however it was at the opposite end from where I was walking. I decided that I would just climb the fence rather than walking way out of my way. I threw my book bag over the fence and sloppily got my big ass over it. Right over the fence there's a huge field surrounded by woods filled with hiking trails. I walked towards the gravel road that led to the entrance. Since this is a river valley, as you walked away from the river, you'd be walking uphill. Not so bad in some spots, really steep in others. I knew the worst part of the hike would be when approaching the entrance, since that would be the steepest part of the hike. Trudging up the hill leading to the entrance, I could see the gateway leading to the park, when for some reason I looked to my right. I want to say I heard someone, but I can't say for sure why I looked in that direction. I saw a little girl in a white dress running the opposite direction, down the hill, just before the wood line. I didn't think much of it at first, because there is a pretty big playground for little kids close to the entrance. To me it was nothing out of the ordinary, until I looked forward and noticed the gate was closed. At that time of the day, the whole park was still closed, so that left me scratching my head a bit. I looked back to where I saw the little girl, and there were no cars or parents in sight. I was never alarmed during this encounter, however. I still felt compelled to check it out. I walked over to where I last saw her running, thinking most likely her parents had brought her out for an early hike before the place was overrun with other kids. But I better make sure she isn't lost or anything bad. When I got to the wood line, I was surprised to see there were no trails. I took a closer look in the woods, with a big ravine and dense woods all around, and even a few fallen trees telling me there were definitely no trails leading in or out of the area. I took a quick look all around. No girl or anyone else for that matter. Weird, I thought, and continued on out of the park. It was certainly something I would have told my buddies about, but what I didn't realize was that the land my friends were staying on was private property, and there were groundskeepers pissed that they were in there, and it was a whole thing, so it didn't come up when I got up with them. Although the event stayed on my mind. A few months later I was at a party, and I told this very story to a group of people, and a chick I didn't know corroborated my story. She said she saw a little girl in a white dress at night, standing on the side of the road at the entrance of the park as she drove by. After that I looked up haunted places in the area, and the damn park came up in a Google search. There's a fake haunted house on the grounds, but that's more like an amusement park during the Halloween season. I didn't think the place was actually haunted. If that wasn't enough, I had another spooky experience in the same area, but that's another story. Either way, that was enough for me to believe. 5. Hey, my name is Cache, but my friends call me Cash. The story I'm about to tell you is based on true events that took place when I was a teenager. I'm 30 years old now, and this experience still gives me chills before I go to bed at night. Growing up, it was always 4 people living in my household: my mother, me, the oldest, and my 2 brothers. Around 2005, me and my family moved into a housing complex a few blocks from our old house. Odd things would happen in our apartment, but nothing really that couldn't be debunked. I would always try and convince myself with some reasoning before freaking out. Me and my family really never discussed ghost and paranormal stuff, but we all knew it was real. One night, while getting ready for school the next morning, I decided to just turn my TV off and lay down while checking my social media. My mom was in her room with her door shut, as well as my brothers sleeping soundly in their room. I've always kept my door shut because open doors at night just creep me out. While on my phone, I felt myself dozing off, so I decided to call it a night and go to sleep. Once my phone was away and on the charger, I returned to lay on my side and fell asleep soundly. Around 2 a.m. I know it was 2 a.m. because I would check my phone always when I wake up. I needed to go to the bathroom. All the lights were off in the apartment, and I quickly returned to my room and shut my door, climbed into cozy bed, and tried falling back to sleep. I started to doze off again, slowly feeling myself drifting back to sleep, when suddenly I felt someone or something gently sit at the foot of my bed. I froze up immediately. I was so scared I couldn't even scream, so I just stayed turned on my side, praying whatever was in my room would leave. Then I started to hear whispers. I kid you not. It sounded like there were multiple people in my room whispering amongst each other. I started to plan an escape and wanted to muster enough courage to get the hell out of there, but my prayers turned into muffled whimpers. When all of a sudden, I heard clear as day, "Shh, you're gonna wake her up." I don't know where the strength came from, but I jumped out of my bed and ran straight to my mother's room and got in bed with her. She woke up and was asking, "What's wrong with you?" Keep in mind, I'm 16 years old, jumping into my mother's bed like a little girl. I explained to her that there was something in my room. And as I was telling her this, I glanced over at her door and saw this huge, shadowy mass just standing there looking at me. I screamed. My mother cut her light on and asked, "What the hell is going on?" I told her there was a shadow man standing by the door. She said there's nothing there and to just go to bed. That night I slept in her bed because I refused to go back to my room. The next morning, after my brothers left for day camp, we were sitting in the dining room having breakfast, when she decided to come out and say she's seen the shadow man I was talking about the night before. My jaw dropped. She said she's seen him a few times before while me and my brothers were at school, and one time at night in the kitchen. She then opened up about her coming home to all her cabinets open, with no explanation and strange knocking. Since that day, I knew it wasn't me being crazy. This was something real and spiritually connected to the property. A haunting that still gives me creeps to this day. Hey everybody, Hellraiser here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 172. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Okay, boom, we're in January. Spoilers, I recorded this on the 18th of December. So there you are, you're all enjoying the future, I'm stuck in the past. What's it like in your time? Is the world a better place? Is it still covered in poopies? Hopefully I'll find out. Okay, and with that, I'm gonna head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.